record this evening's discussion. I just want to welcome you to this is the new year for Calumet Nature Exchange. Please advise if a teacher wishes to earn professional development credit. I hear nothing. I am recording this evening's session and it will be available on Ollie's website within a week. The agenda calls for self-introductions, followed by tonight's speaker, Catherine Hu. A Q&A session follows her presentation. So let's get started with self-introductions. I am Michael Bowes, Executive Director of the Association for the Wolf Lake Initiative. And this is tonight's speaker, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name's Catherine. I'm a conservation ecologist with the Field Museum.
Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne Kozlowski. I'm the volunteer site steward at Eggers Grove. They're on the east side.
Tell them you're the burn boss.
I'm a burn boss. Yes.
Yes. Hi.
I'm a burn boss. I'm the site steward. I can be a member of a prescribed burn crew, and I am an herbicide applicator.
Yes. All worthy titles. I love them.
Yeah.
And
I forgot. I'm a chainsaw assistant.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
chainsaw feller assistant. Yes.
Excellent. And I'm Eve DeRay. I'm retired and I'm just interested in the information.
Okay. Mary. Dave.
Dave Matsura here. I'm a Whiting Roberts resident and a member of OLLI, and I thought this was going to be, or I hope it's going to be a great presentation, which I'm sure it will be, and I hope to learn something about collecting seeds and storing them and planting them.
Okay. Wayne.
If I
Diane.
could. Hello,
Christine?
my name,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think I've got it on. Hello, my name is Wayne Garitano. I actually met Marianne this past Saturday at Eggers. Very knowledgeable person. And I was actually at Field Museum today. We were doing the Calumet Revisited section, and then we wound up doing the whole, quite a bit of the museum. It's been a while since I've been there and it's got a lot to offer.
All right. Christine, are you there?
Hi, yep, I'm here. Hi, Chris Wally. I'm originally from the east side, although I live in Boston now, but I've been working with the Southeast Chicago Historical Museum in Cal Park, and we're working on a project right now about the environmental history of the area. So I thought this would be a great presentation to listen to. So thank you.
Yeah, she's also author of Exit Zero. Mary Zelinsik, sorry. Kathy Sippel.
Hi, thank you. I've got a lot of titles to Kathy Sippel. My title with Earth Charter Indiana is Senior Resiliency Coordinator for Northwest Indiana. And I'm here because I'm working on a regional climate action plan. I see native plants as being, a possible strategy that we can all pursue regionally. And I'm also pursuing a regional certification through the National Wildlife Federation to get the whole region certified. We'd be the first region if we end up doing that. So a few other things too, I can drop them in chat, but that's probably enough for me. Thanks for allowing me to be here.
All right.
Hey, Kathy, this is Blake. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for asking.
I'd like to find out how do I get my garden certified? I got a backyard and a couple of gardens at my community farm on the south side of Chicago. And I'm also growing some Native American crops, Native Americans, that lived or passed through the Calumet years ago, and I'm growing some Cherokee to honor one of my late grandparents.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'll drop the links in chat. It is for Northwest Indiana, but you can probably follow these links to find certification wherever you are. So thanks for asking.
All right. So let's get started with our guest tonight, Catherine Fu of the Field Museum. She'll be talking about seed collecting. Go ahead, Catherine.
All right, thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you all about seeds today. My name is Catherine. I'm a conservation ecologist with the Field Museum. And a little bit more about me. I have a master's in conservation from UW-Madison, and during this time, I worked as an ecological restoration intern at Shaw Nature Reserve, which is outside of St. Louis. And I continued doing restoration in an urban park in St. Louis called Forest Park for the past 5 years, where I managed about 70 acres of woodlands and savanna. I did all the usual things: invasive removals, native plantings, seed collection, all that good stuff. And I moved here last summer, so I'm pretty new to Chicago and the Calumet region. And I'm also a watercolor illustrator. I like to paint plants and animals that I come across to help me learn. So here's just an outline of the journey that we're going to go on tonight. I want to talk a little bit about the basics of seed. Mostly we'll be talking about how humans collect and disperse seed, but I wanted to go over some natural seed dispersal techniques because I think it's really fascinating. Then we'll go into the seed collection portion. We'll talk about identification, timing, and tools, what to do with the seed after you collect it, like processing and sowing. And lastly, I will point to some resources that might be useful to you all, especially if you're new to seed collection. I actually made a Google Drive folder that I could share out if people are interested. So let's get started. So for those of you who are new to seed collection, welcome. Seed collection is simply harvesting ripe seeds to spread elsewhere. And the reason we do this is mainly for restorations and for native plant gardens. Seed is the cheapest and most efficient way to grow more native plants. You can certainly get trays of plants and plant those, but that requires like digging holes and watering, and it's a lot of maintenance and work. And so I think if you can go the seed route, I'd recommend that. And I also think seed collection is a great accessible activity. If you're trying to get kids and families outside engaging with nature, this is a great thing to do with them. So real quick, we'll do an overview of basics. What is a seed? So the seed is a reproductive unit of a plant that's formed after pollination and fertilization. So the pollen from the stamen, which is the male part of a plant, comes into contact with the pistil, which is the female part of a plant, which also contains the ovule. So that's what develops into an egg or into a seed. So only flowers with female parts are capable of producing seeds. And there's a lot of different arrangements of the male and female parts on plants. So there's plants with hermaphrodite flowers like this Michigan lily right here. You can see that the long brown bits, those are the male parts where the pollen is produced. And then the pistil right here, that's the female part in the middle. Then there's monoecious plants, which means there are male flowers and female flowers on one plant, but they're on separate flowers, if that makes sense. So the male oaks are a great example of this. So the catkins, little dangly things on oaks that you see in the spring, those are clusters of male flowers. And the female flowers are really tiny. They're at the tips of the branches, but they occur on one plant. And then there's dioecious plants, so plants that have separate male plants and female plants. So the female plants only have female flowers, the male plants only have male flowers. So this is pretty common in like fruit trees, like persimmons, for example. You need a male and a female in order to produce fruit, and only the female will have the fruit and seeds. And so I have pictures here of sassafras. So the male flower, you can see these things sticking out. These are the stamens or the male parts. And then on the female flower, you can see the pistil right here. That's the ovary, and the stigma right here, that little white bit that catches the pollen. And it kind of looks like it has little stamens maybe, but those are actually infertile. So let's talk a little bit about how nature does it. I'll mostly be talking about how humans disperse seed later on, but I think it's really interesting to talk about how nature disperses seeds. So we're probably all really familiar with like squirrels and blue jays and other birds that love to eat the fleshy fruits like plums and cherries, and the nuts like pecans, acorns, hickory nuts, those large, high in protein food sources. And then they excrete out the seed elsewhere. There's also, we're probably all familiar with burrs. So this is a picture of an agrimony seed, and you can see that it's got hooked barbs and that stick to fur and clothing very easily. Another very fascinating form of seed dispersal is by ants, and this is called myrmecochory. A lot of spring ephemerals actually depend on ants for seed dispersal. So spring ephemerals are a group of plants that complete their entire life cycle before trees leaf out. And so I have a picture here of celandine poppy. The seed pod has opened and the seeds have fallen out, and you can see the little dark spots are the seed, and the white part, kind of shaped like a gummy worm, is called an elizome, and that's what I like to call an ant snack. So the ants, certain species of ants that are like bigger, they can carry that seed back to their nest. They'll eat off the elizome, which is like a fatty appendage. It's very nutritious, and then they'll throw the seed into their compost pile, which happens to be a great place for the seed to germinate, and that's kind of like a win-win situation for the plant and the ant. And I have this video here. If you have never checked out Bill Duncan's work, he's an amazing nature photographer, but I just thought this would be fun to see. Oops, sorry. Next we have wind and water dispersal. So a lot of plants depend on the wind for getting their seeds out. So a lot of grasses like little blue stem. As you can see here, they're light and fluffy. Goldenrods and asters are probably familiar with. In the fall, all that fluff are probably coming from plants like these. Bladdernut is a great example of something that is water dispersed. The seed pods are really light and full of air, and they float. And this shrub likes to grow near water, so that makes a lot of sense. And lastly, a fun one, ballistic or explosive seed dispersal. On the left, you can see a picture of geranium that I caught at a really good time. This one on the left here has the seeds intact still, these round guys at bottom. And on the right, you can see the seeds have already sprung out. And this is good to know when you're collecting, like what type of plant you're dealing with so that you can be prepared and you can come knowing what you're looking for. So you're not collecting some random other plant part instead of the seed. Impatiens or touch me not is another genus that has explosive seeds. So I will play this video here. It'll show you in slow motion. Yeah, if you want to watch the whole thing, it's from BBC Earth. Huh. Okay. So now that we've talked about how nature does it, how do humans do it? So let's start with identifying the seed. This can be tricky sometimes. There's definitely a lot to learn, but there's also a lot of good resources out there. And one that I'll point you to is the Lake County Seed Collection Guide. They have like 12 or 13 guides. And here's just an example real quick. I'll come back to this in the end too, but it has a lot of great pictures showing the plant, the seed pod, what the seed looks like and how big it is, things like that. So a lot of my pictures are taken from this guide. So I'm just going to go over, just point out several common plant families or groups that you might run into and what their seed usually looks like. So you kind of have an idea of all the sizes and shapes and colors. So for the rose family, this includes things like raspberries, blackberries, cherry, serviceberry, juneberry, things like that. They have this big, like juicy berry that's pretty easy to identify. And then we have our spring ephemerals group, which I mentioned earlier. Here's another example called bellwort. Its seeds also have these elysomes that are eaten by ants. So a lot of spring ephemerals like bloodroot, Dutchman's breeches, spring beauties, trout lilies, and trilliums have these seeds that are ant dispersed, and seeds like these don't really dry or store well. So these are ones that you would want to sow right away. So bean family, this one's pretty easy to ID, I think. They have these pods that split open. So if you think like green beans or peas or peanuts, those are all in the bean family. And they have kind of similar looking seed pods. Next, we have this golden Alexander, which is a very commonly used plant in restoration. It's in the carrot family. Everything in the carrot family has this upside down umbrella shaped seed flower / seed head. And the seeds themselves kind of look like dill or parsley seeds, if you're familiar with that. And then we have mustards. So mustards also have pods, but they're much more slender than a bean pod. And so we have smooth rock cress here, and these really thin pods will turn tan and kind of split open when they're ready. Next, we have the mint family. So a lot of mints have multiple flowers on one head. If you look at this picture right here, each one of these tubes is an individual flower, and the seed is at the base of each flower. And they look like this right here. They're really tiny. They can actually be a little darker than that sometimes. But other things like horse mints, hyssops, and mountain mints kind of have a similar look. And next we have the aster family. It's a huge family, but there are a lot of plants in it that are pretty fluffy, like goldenrods, blazing star here, and the aster in the Symphyotrichum genus. So the fluffy part is not the seed, it's attached to the seed, like you see in this picture. Now we'll talk about a couple graminoids. So sedges, grasses, and rushes. Usually it's pretty easy to see the seed heads. The seed and flowering stalks are usually above or about the same height as the leaf blades. So the arrow right here is pointing to the seed heads of this sedge, and here's a close-up. And then we have this foul manna grass with its drooping seed heads. There's a close-up of what they look like, and then an even closer look at one of these. And if you take off the covering, this is what the seed looks like. But when you're processing seed and things like that, you don't have to get it that clean or anything. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. And now we have a few tricky ones. So Echinacea and Rudbeckia are pretty commonly used in gardens and in restorations. So coneflowers and black-eyed Susan. For the coneflower, you can see here that there's a lot of other bits. So when you're collecting it, you're probably just cutting the seed head off. And then when you crush it, you get all of these bits. So these are all just dried up florets or bracts or just other parts of the flower. The ones in the green boxes are seed that is fertilized and will become a new plant. These guys in the middle here kind of look like seed, but they have not been fertilized. And even from the picture, you can kind of tell that they're empty. If you were to press on it, you would find that there's nothing in there. These guys are a little more plump. And the same with the Rudbeckia, it's kind of has that same cone-ish shape. But yeah, when you're processing your seed, you might find a lot of other plant bits. So yeah, just to, I showed you a lot of examples just now, but just in general, when you're looking for ripe seed, they're generally dark in color, hard when you try to squish them, or dry. The dry usually more applies to grasses. So like you see here, this is bottlebrush rye, and it has turned tan. It's dry looking, it's not green anymore. If I were to slide my hand across it, the seeds would probably just pop off, and that's a great sign that the seed is ready. We have some wild leek here. They're dark in color, they're hard. You can't tell they're hard, I guess, from a picture, but they are. And you can see that even though the capsule that the seed was in is still green, sometimes the seed can be ripe. So you can always check one before you start collecting.
I didn't see that.
And here we have these two pictures of the same species. So this is bloodroot, which is another spring ephemeral with the ant snack on it. This guy is ripe. It's brown in color. It's dark in color. And you can see here, I had opened a pod to check if it was ready, and it's not. And you can tell because the seeds are really light in color. And if you were to, it would be really squishy if you tried to squeeze one of those. So do not collect that. And of course, there's always a few exceptions. There's a few species that have white seed when they're ripe, like the puccoons, the Lithospermum genus. I think marble seed also has white seed when they're ripe. But I don't think you have to worry about that too much. In general, dark in color, hard and dry. So now you know what the seeds look like. When do we collect them? So I think for me, seed collection starts way before the seed actually forms. I always like to look for the plants during their flowering time, when they are easiest to see and identify. So if you have something, maybe it's like a little bit rare, or it's really short and it's going to get covered up by other vegetation, then it's a great idea to go out when they're flowering and either map it like on ArcGIS or physically mark their locations with a flag, so that you can come back to it later. That's a great thing to do. But in general, spring ephemerals ripen starting mid-May. Sedges are ready in June and July, and after July, like July through November, lots of species are ready. You can collect every week, basically. There are some species that like to be a little tricky, like Trillium here. It's got these maroon, beautiful maroon color is one of the spring ephemerals that bloom in April and May-ish. It doesn't ripen until July. And so one of the resources I'm pointing you towards is a Lake County seed collection guide. It's got a date when the photos were taken. So this gives you a great idea of when you can expect to go collecting that seed. And if you're trying to get like maximum genetic diversity, it's best to collect during the early, middle, and late seeding period. And what I mean is once you see seeds start to ripen, you go and collect a few of those, and then sometime during the middle, when there's a lot of individuals that have ripe seed, you collect then, and then you can wait until like the last few individuals are still flowering and seeding and collect some of those. And that'll maximize your genetic diversity, as well as collecting from as many different individuals as possible. And I think I've mostly heard that you want to source your seeds within 100 miles of the location that you're planning to put it down. Probably the closer the better. And I would recommend collecting seed when it's dry. You can do it when it's wet, but there's just big when it's raining or snowy, but there's just a bigger chance that it's gonna get moldy possibly. So yeah, I would recommend doing it during a dry time. And just a quick note on seed collecting ethics, always look at the guidelines for where you're collecting. If you are doing a forest preserve workday, then the leader of the workday should be able to tell you the rules. If you're on private land, you should ask the landowner. It's always a good idea to leave some seeds for wildlife to eat and for the plant itself to reproduce. And in general, I've heard that for common and perennial plants, I would collect up to 30% or a third of the seed that you see, and for annuals and rare plants, maybe up to 10%. So seed collection is a pretty low-tech activity. I like to collect by hand if I can. It's usually pretty easy, like grasses and sedges, and a lot of the flowers actually are pretty easy to strip off by hand. They shouldn't require a lot of tugging if they're ripe. And I find that it's a lot cleaner. You don't have to pick out a lot of like stems and leaves after the fact. Pruners are a great tool though, especially if you're collecting something that's pokey, like purple coneflower or rattlesnake master, or if you're just trying to collect a lot of things really quickly, like cut a bunch of grass heads off at one time. So there's regular pruners, which work just fine. The picture I have there are cut and hold pruners, which are fancy. I've never used them, but it holds on to the thing that you're cutting, so you don't even have to touch it. It can go straight into your bag, which is pretty cool. Other tools, you'll need some sort of container. So this is a seed collection bag that you can buy. You can, I'm sure, make your own. It wraps around your waist so you have both hands free. You can use kitty litter bins, trash bins. Plastic bags are fine too. Just at the end of the day, you'll want somewhere to lay out your seed so that it can dry out. It doesn't have to be like quite this elaborate, but just somewhere where you can lay out your seed and have it dry out, and make sure that it's protected from mice and other insects. So now you got all this seed, like what's next? So the next step would be processing the seed. Sometimes people call it cleaning seed or prepping seed. And the purpose of this is to make sure that all of your seeds are separate from each other, so that when you are laying your seed down, you're not putting down like 100 seeds of one species in 1 square foot. You want it to be more spread out. So if you have a ton of seed, like if you just have tarp loads, like in this picture on the left here, you can use a hammer mill. So it's basically this machine that has really dull blades that cuts up the plant material, and you can switch out the screen size depending on how small you want your plant to be chopped up. And if you have the storage space, it doesn't really matter if there's stems and leaves in there. It's all going to get tossed out into the prairie or woods anyway. So I wouldn't be too concerned about cleaning your seed really clean unless you are trying to sell it or something like that. Most of us will probably be using these screens that you can make with mesh and pieces of wood. And this is a great tool. You can get different sizes of mesh and just clean it over like a bin. Every seed is kind of different, and so you have to get creative with it. I've seen people use bricks and rolling pins and water bottles, and there's different techniques to different types of seed. Like if you have a really hard capsule, you can use a hammer like what's happening here, or you can step on it. If it's really spiky like coneflower, I've like to just put it on the ground and step on it. If you have a small amount, you can use like a seed screen, or if it's really tiny seed, the seed screen does a good job. You can buy sets of these, and they all it's a stack of different mesh sizes, and it's pretty expensive, but so I would say kitchen strainers work just as well, as long as you can get a few different sizes. Then yeah, seed processing is an activity that is done, I think, best with friends or volunteers. It's a lot of work and can be a little tedious. And like I said, every seed is a little bit different. So here's just a video that I made about milkweed and trying to defluff it. Some people had really like elaborate setups in their vacuums. So I was just using the shop vac. But that's a fun way to do. There's a tons of videos on YouTube of people in their creative seed processing ways. Oh, okay. So after you process them, you're going to want to, if you have a lot, I would recommend weighing and keeping records each year of how much of each species you got. At this point, they should be dry enough that you can store them in plastic if you'd like. And I would put it in some sort of closed container so that animals can't get to it. And I would store it in, if you're not trying to sow it right away, store it in a cool, dry place. So the refrigerator is good. Maybe your garage or the basement is also great. And next is seed mixing. So this is more relevant for larger restorations, or like if you want to make a wildflower mix for your garden. It can be helpful to create a spreadsheet of species and ounces that you want of each species, or like a percentage of the total weight that you want of each species. I like to do this in the winter so that you can be ready to collect, so you know exactly how much you need of each species to collect, and you don't have to waste any time getting too much of one plant or not enough of another. And it's a fun time, like you see in this picture. You really are just weighing out each species, putting it in whatever bin it belongs to, and mixing it up. And now we'll talk about sending your seed and hopes outside, either outside or preparing the seed to grow indoors. Sowing seed outside is going to be the least maintenance, fastest way, I think, if it's possible for your project. So seed to soil contact is very important. because if you put it on leaf litter or mulch, there might be a chance that the seed isn't going to make it. So ideally, you are putting seed down either after a burn, or if burn isn't possible, then sometime in the winter on bare soil. Probably like I would say November through January, maybe early February is okay. You might have to do some leaf raking or leaf blowing to expose the areas that you want to put the seed down. And if it's snowing while you're doing, that's bonus points. The snow helps the seed work itself into the ground. And it's also easier to see where you've been when there's snow on the ground. You can see where you've scattered the seed, so you're not over or under seeding a spot. And before you put out seed, you are mixing. It's best, I think, to mix it with some sort of carrier like sawdust or vermiculite or sand. Sand is a little bit small, I think, for most things. If you have a lot of bigger seed like grasses, I would recommend sawdust or vermiculite. If you're using sawdust, try to make sure that it's untreated, so it doesn't have any chemicals in it. And mixing it is just kind of to dilute the seed a little bit, to kind of loosen it up, make sure you're not putting down too much each handful. It's easy to be a little heavy-handed, and you can't pick it back up once you put it down. So I try to do at least like 50% seed, 50% carrier, sometimes even a little bit more carrier. So those are just some tips. And if you are preparing seed to grow indoors, like if you want to grow trays in a greenhouse or something like that, you might have to do a few additional steps like stratification or scarification. And these just mean these are just processes that imitate the seasons changing or passing through an animal's digestive system. So one type of stratification, which I'll show you in the video in a minute, is cold moist stratification. It's probably the most common one for our native plants. You're basically exposing the seed to a period of cold and wetness, usually for a month or two. And then once the seed experiences warmth again, it knows that it's time to germinate. And an example of scarification, I've seen people put seeds in boiling water, or scratch off the seed coat with sandpaper, things like that, to just give the seed the signal that it's time to germinate. So Field Museum collects seed from the native gardens right outside of it, and we have been partnering with the UIC greenhouse for a few years now to grow trays of plants, and these get planted out in the community in native gardens at churches, schools, and libraries. And so I made a little video of how we stratify this seed. Okay. All right. So lastly, I just wanted to share some resources that might be helpful for you all. I think the best way to learn is to go to work days with experienced collectors. Go spend some time with those seedy people and learn you learn a lot by doing, and that's how I've mostly learned. If you have your own garden or your own land, I think it's great. That's a great resource. Also, you can keep track there. So if you maybe one year you discover a cool plant and you figure out what it is, and then you mark it and you go back every few weeks to check on it, and you can kind of learn like how it looks during its entire life cycle. I think that's pretty cool. Lake County Forest Preserves field guides. I've already showed you that, but I can share this Google folder with you. They have this great index that has everything alphabetical order by scientific name, and it tells you which guide it's in and what page it's on. And so it's split up by spring, summer, and fall. Also by habitat, woodland, prairie, wetland, and also by forbs, grasses, and they have woody plants, a separate one, and asters and goldenrod separately. So there's a lot. It's a very good resource, probably all the plants that you'll ever meet. There's some good information at the front about different types of seeds that we talked about today. And they also show some invasive or non-native seeds, and they have this do not collect symbol. So that's also great information to know. And yeah, like I said, there's also that date showing when the photo was taken, so you have an idea of when to collect. Another great resource is the Prairie Moon website. So here I have pulled up, you can search, let's see, search from Columbine here. If you scroll down into this details area, there's a lot of good information. Germination code is an important one. If you wanna grow this in a greenhouse, you can hover over each of these symbols and it'll tell you more information on how to do the stratification. All of that information is also in spreadsheets. So here's they have two versions of the cultural guide. This one I think is a little bit older. It kind of has some older scientific names. But it has a lot of good information on germination code, what type of soil moisture, the amount of sun it needs, the height, bloom time, things like that. There's another prettier version that has, I think, just more of the relevant information. If you're like new to gardening, this one might be the best one to start at. I also, hopefully this is not too much information, but I also combined the Prairie Moon cultural guide with the Flora of Chicago so that you can scroll and see which species are available at Prairie Moon. There's everything that's in red right here is non-native. So you can see that Prairie Moon offers some plants that are actually not native to the Chicago region. So I think that's very interesting. They serve, I think, the Midwest. So some of the lower Midwest plants maybe should not be planted up here in Chicago. And then I also found this great resource by Woods to Wetlands, and they have seed collection that is sorted by dates and then also sorted by name. So the dates one, it shows you a lot of the species, each species. I think this is for Northern Illinois, so it's very relevant to Chicago region. So that the one by dates looks like this, and then there's one if you wanted to look alphabetically by scientific name, they have that version as well. So all of this is in the Google folder, which I can share out with you guys if you want it. And Field Museum is a steward at Beaubien Woods, and we work together with other Calumet sites, Eggers Grove, that Marianne co-stewards, Whistler Woods, and Kickapoo Woods. And we put together a lot of seed collecting days, August through October, and then come together in December to do a big seed processing day, like this photo shows here. So if you're interested at all in that, you can shoot me an email. I can add you to the email list and you'll hear about all of our events. That is my presentation. Thank you all so much for your interest and your attention. Does anyone have any questions?
I got one. What's your track record like in St. Louis in terms of habitat restoration? I said, what's your track record in habitat restoration when you were in St. Louis? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Blake. Catherine, can you hear Blake?
I
think
said,
my-
what's your track record in habitat restoration when you were in St. Louis?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, how well you did in habitat restoration in St. Louis in terms of helping wildlife?
Well, that's a good question. So in terms of like acres, I think I helped bring in like 18 new acres during my time under restoration. As for wildlife, I don't think so. We never have really had resources to do that sort of monitoring. We were always doing vegetation monitoring, and that showed a lot of improvement. Like I remember one of our sites had maybe like 5 or 6 species before we did anything in there. And then a year or two later, we sampled again and there were 70 or 80 species, which was pretty awesome to see. We heard a lot of like anecdotal evidence that our restorations were working, like there were more indigo bunting spotted, which is a beautiful blue bird. We saw a lot of turkeys. I think they were eating our seed, but that's okay. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Are your former habitats in good hands since you left here for Chicago?
I hope so. Yeah, there's some good people down there. Yeah, I hope the good work will continue.
What will you bring to the table? What will you bring to the table over here in Chicago in terms of habitat restoration down in the Calumet?
I think I was working in an urban park, so I think I understand like some of the challenges that come with working in a place where it's not just nature, there's a lot of nature and people interacting. And I think that's valuable experience. I guess in general, like the plants are pretty similar. I do have a lot to learn up here, but yeah.
Here, let me try answering that one for Catherine. Blake.
Oh, God.
First of all, Catherine has been at Eggers Seed Collection work days. And because she's been there, we have had someone who is knowledgeable about plants and could actually work independent of supervision, which has been really, really helpful just in terms of collecting more seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And as a scientist, she's very precise. And I can tell you there is a glorious table that actually tracks and just is a great record of exactly what was collected at Calumet and the quantities. And that is precisely what is needed to just, one of the ways you can track whether or not there is progress is whether or not that seed collection activity creates more seed year after year. Then you know you're really doing something right. And Catherine's already hit the ground running with that. And I was really appreciative of the work she was doing at Eggers and at the seed processing.
Thank you, Marianne.
Sure. Oh,
Oh, Chris, do you have a question?
Yep, I was just wondering, thank you so much. It was really fascinating. So given the Calumet region and its kind of history of industrial pollution, so I was wondering kind of if you could talk a little bit about the kind of challenges with bringing native plants back into the region because of the legacy of environmental pollution. Like, are there certain plants that do better or have a worse time, or how all do you think about those kinds of questions?
Oh, that's a tough one. And honestly, I don't think I've been here long enough to have a good answer for that. I guess in general, I can talk about like disturbance really does affect what kinds of plants can grow in an area. Like if there's been a lot of soil disturbance, that usually attracts a lot of weedier species, and it makes it really hard for the more delicate or the more conservative species to thrive. I don't know if I can point to like specific ones right now, but also it's disturbance also favors invasive plants. And so that creates like an additional layer of challenge for us when we're doing restoration. Marianne, do you have a better answer? Sorry, I just haven't been here that long, so I don't want to say anything incorrect.
yeah, well, you know, when it comes to industry, I'm not sure. Well, there's several ways of looking at it. Number one, industry changed the landscape in that, for instance, at Eggers, industry dumped a lot of slag at the southern end of Eggers. And what that did was cut off our natural drainage to Wolf Lake. And what that did was create too much water in our marshes. And that allowed the invasive species like Phragmites and cattails and reed canary grass to thrive because they like deeper water. And the deeper water actually was harmful for our native species. And so they faded. And so the district has spent a lot of, resources to correct those problems. When it comes to pollution per se, like with Catherine, I'm not sure what the answer to that would be, but industry definitely by just they've destroyed wetlands. They've altered, the water levels either to totally drain them or to create what one of the ecologists called a bathtub of our East Marsh. And that has hurt. The additional problems are also, besides invasive plants, like Catherine's mentioned, is that when we do not pay attention to the animal species which are thriving in urban environments, and that is deer. Deer are considered by some stewards the worst predator in Cook County. And I can tell you that I see many fewer flowers on my plants because of deer. In fact, I don't know, Catherine, if you're involved in any native plant gardens I know the Field Museum has huge gardens and they're a huge contributor that way. But in some areas in Cook County, the stewards have formed what they call just their own communities for growing native plants. So we have just started this in the Calumet region because, for instance, I absolutely can never find seeds for some really valuable woodland plants because the deer eat them down to the ground. So I cannot get seeds for early meadow rue, Thalictrum diecum, or the bellwort, the beautiful bellwort, Uvularia grandiflora, that Catherine had pictures of. The deer just eat the plants to the point where they simply do not flower. They cannot flower and they barely survive. So we have, with approval, with all of the documentation necessary from the Cook County Forest Preserves, we have taken 3 plants of 3 species and given them to a local gardener who has been growing them now for 2 or 3 years. And it is because of her efforts that we have seeds for these, actually for 2 of the 3 species. As it turned out, one of the species was dioecious. It was early meadow rue, and there are male and female plants. And we didn't know what we were giving her. And the 3 plants we gave her were all male. And so we're going to have to, figure out how to find a female plant for her garden so that we can get seeds for early meadow rue. Besides the lands, just the way we've developed land or actually destroyed it. There's also just a superabundance of certain species like deer, which are also hurting restoration. People have to accept the fact that there are too many deer and perhaps they need to be culled. And then restoration can take part in earnest. Right now, I can grow grasses. I can grow a lot of really beautiful sedges and bulrushes, but flowers, I should have lobelia, which is this gorgeous dark blue spike of flowers that reaches 4 feet tall. My lobelia, if they survive, are about 6 to 8 inches tall. That's it. And sometimes I can collect seed from them and sometimes I can't, depending if I can find them because they're so small. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I do just think of something. I did see at Whistler Woods, along the fence there where it's along like ArcelorMittal, I think now it's Cleveland Cliffs, but they used to use that area as a driveway and parking lot. And there's spiranthes there popping out of the cement, which is ladies' tresses. It's a very rare orchid. So I just think that's fascinating that nature can be so resilient. So I think there's still hope out there.
Yes. By the way,
Okay.
also helping with seed restoration are the power companies. So we have a set of power lines running right through the middle of Eggers at 118th Street. And the power company has been seeding in there. And there are huge stands of little blue stem, and there's Rudbeckia. So there's black-eyed Susan, and a lot of other really nice plants, Indian grass, elfin goldenrod, the Solidago nemoralis, so they're a partner too in helping.
Should we have a hunting season deer in Cook County?
What was that?
Again,
I was saying, should we have a deer hunting season here in Cook County to keep the deer down?
Actually, that would be too dangerous. What the way the deer are controlled in various neighborhoods. So for instance, in certain suburbs, I know that if the neighbors are complaining about the deer, a suburb can hire sharpshooters from the state of Illinois, and the deer are culled in a safe location where people, where nothing can happen. I mean, there is hunting. There is a hunting season at William Powers. They closed down some of the roads in there, but it's not, I don't believe it's for deer. I think it's for waterfowl. Do you know,
Yeah.
Michael?
waterfowl.
Yeah. But yeah, generally that is something you need permits from the state of Illinois before you can take deer, and I don't think it's allowed in Cook County. Individuals cannot hunt in Cook County. It's just too populous.
Wayne has a question, are there any plans for the Shroud site, I suppose, as far as seating? And I don't know if Catherine is familiar with that, but that's a Superfund site, Indian Creek. And Wayne, for one thing, it will probably take about 20 years for them to finish with the Superfund site, that tends to be a long period. And I don't think they'll talk about seeding until then. But seeding is important, and I'm sure they're going to address that closer to in maybe 10 or so or 10 or more years, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, that site is a mess. I mean,
Yeah.
for all the destruction of that site with all the garbage that steel mills put into that, I don't know what they're going to do with that. That is such a desolate area right now. It's frightening.
Yeah, Wayne, but it's just going to take a long time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To get to the point where they're concerned about seeding. But hopefully,
Yeah.
they'll figure out a way to keep the folks that caused the problem to begin with from going there. But by that time, they should be 20 years older, and so
Yeah.
they're not riding around in four-wheel
Yeah, right.
four-wheelers.
Unfortunately, I don't have any trust in our politicians to do anything with it.
Yeah.
Well, is any money coming to the south side because of the any of the legislation passed by Congress in 2022? I mean, some areas are hopeful about that. But I don't know. It would seem that the EPA might be better funded for cleanup as a result of some of the legislation passed last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
I think they have more money. Yeah. And
would that mean going to see Robin Kelly and saying, are you getting any money to help with the brownfields in the Calumet region? Right? She is the representative here. Right?
Yes, she is. Congress.
Yeah. Yeah.
2nd district.
Yep. Yep. So I don't know. Maybe it's time to visit Robin Kelly.
yeah.
Yep, time to shake her up a little bit because the south side, but she's representative of a big area.
Yeah,
in
she goes
Illinois.
down to she goes down to the farmland south of
Yeah, Kankakee for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, huge district.
Yeah, the way they gerrymandered it, she's probably not too happy with that.
You know, her district though looks like it's almost a rectangle. I mean, it's just a really long rectangle.
Yeah, the way they gerrymandered it in Illinois, it's ridiculous, but that's politics in our state.
Anything else?
Is February the best time to plant wildflower seeds in our greenhouses?
Is when?
Is February the right time to plant wildflower seeds in our greenhouses?
Yeah.
So they can head start for the spring.
Yeah, I think so. For the project that we're doing with the UIC greenhouse, I went to stratify seeds in mid-December because most of the plants needed like 30 to 60 days of cold moist stratification. And then we're planning to plant mid to late February in the trays in the greenhouse. And then that should be ready. I'd give it at least 2 weeks to grow, probably more if you want like stronger plants. So they should be ready by like late April, May-ish to plant outside.
That's when they get mature?
I mean, that's when they get like big enough to plant outside. They won't be fully grown.
What about for trees and shrubs?
By seed?
Yeah.
Oh.
And nuts and berries.
Yeah. Those take a longer time. For trees, I think you'd have to plant them like I mean, a 1-year-old tree is probably the diameter is probably like a pencil. So if you want to plant like a bigger tree, you'd probably have to keep them in a pot for 3 to 5 years, probably. I don't know if anyone has a lot of experience. We bought our trees, so I don't have experience with actually growing them. But I think the best way, like Marianne was saying, is to support trees that you already have, like in. I guess we're talking about in a restoration, not like at your house, but to do restoration so that you're allowing for sunlight to reach the ground so that trees like oaks and hickories can regenerate themselves. That's probably the best way. But yeah.
I've got some wild plum and some chokeberries
Oh,
to
nice.
plant to plant in the greenhouse. So how I plant chokeberries, since they're considered shrubs, and wild plums since they're considered small trees.
I think you would, let me see. What you said you had choke cherry?
I said chokeberries.
Oh, chokeberry. Okay,
Talking about red or black chokeberry.
gotcha. I think it would be this like the same. Like you would probably look up if it needs any stratification, and I think you would plant it the same way. Does anyone know better?
There used to be along the North Branch stewards are some of the really active stewards in Cook County along the North Branch of the Chicago River. And there used to be one steward who became Mr. Shrub. And he really, he was actually he was the head of landscaping for one of the community colleges up on along the North Branch. And he had a greenhouse. I mean, he had his own greenhouse, so he raised shrubs. But it was like a 2 to 3 to 5 year deal, like you say, Catherine. It's you've got to be really patient with it. But you gave him seed, and a few years later, you'd have these small shrubs that you could plant out. And I'm not sure if he's still around, but he was a great resource for all kinds of shrubs. We gave him bladdernut seeds and small trees, but he grew native roses for me. I gave him, I think it was a Rosa palustris, which is a great native rose shrub. The canes can get to be 7 feet tall. I mean, it's really a magnificent shrub, and it just beautiful pink flowers on it, likes wetter areas. He grew me 20 plants. So yeah, it was really, so it depends. There's resources for local growth like that. But the other thing about putting out plants, it's okay, but as Catherine had said, you have to water them, and that can get to be a real that's a lot of work, and it's a huge commitment, and sometimes it just can't be done out in restoration areas. So you do have to depend upon seed making it and growing out there, even for shrubs. And then some trees, I think once a nurseryman told me that certain trees really do not transplant well. I think hickories are in that category, where they don't have a good chance of making it. They don't like being potted. They don't like being taken out of their pots, or the root balls moved. So you're better off just trying to grow some of these from seed. So you're better off removing the invasive species and just letting the the squirrels do a lot of the work for you.
I'm considering planting blueberry seeds and pawpaw seeds. And how long do those take?
No experience with those.
I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some resources though that you can look into.
Is there any hope for wild rice to come back to the southeast side, especially in large bodies of water, as long as there's some clean air?
I don't know anything about wild rice. I am sorry.
You
How
got me
about
stumped, Mike.
you, Marianne?
There's such a thing as rice cut grass, which,
I'm talking about wild rice.
yeah, I know, and I'm countering with the only thing I know. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. It would be wonderful if we could bring it back, isn't it? There's something to look into.
Okay, further questions? Okay, Blake, I think you asked some really good questions there and you stumped some. on
Yeah.
a couple of them, I think. But I want to thank everyone for being here, particularly Catherine. And next month, I'm not sure what's, I don't have a speaker yet. And but I'll send out the notices in plenty of time so we can prepare for it. Okay?
All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you,
All right, see ya.
Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary
Catherine,
Ann.
thank you, Michael. Bye. Bye, brother.